Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, we are here to consider the budget which the government has put forward for the country. And it's the impact of that budget that I want to consider, the impact that it will have on my constituents in Croydon North. Like the rest of the country, Croydon is experiencing a social care crisis. I regularly have older and disabled people visiting my office to say they can't get home care, they don't get adequate support when they leave hospital, and local charities are coming to tell me that the money they need, the funding they need, has dried up as well. Now, after the Chancellor ignored the social care crisis in his autumn statement, we were hoping for better this time. And although £2 billion extra over 3 years is a welcome start, it goes absolutely nowhere near resolving this crisis. These services have already been cut by £5 billion since 2010. 26% fewer people receive help today, even though there are more older people needing that help. The King's Fund projects a £2.8 billion funding gap every year by the end of this decade, but only £2 billion is being made available over 3 years. So all I can say to my older constituents and the disabled people that come to ask me what the government is doing to help them, all I can say is that the Chancellor has responded to their plight by imposing yet more cuts. Now, it's galling to see the Department for Communities and Local Government offering Surrey County Council a sweetheart deal that is denied to Croydon and is denied to people living in every other part of the country as well. It's not only Surrey that has this problem to deal with, it's every local authority, every community is struggling with this problem. And I regret immensely that the Secretary of State failed to answer my question about whether he knew in advance about the letter that was sent from his department to Surrey County Council offering them a sweetheart deal. We need to know whether he knew about that in advance of it being withdrawn, because if he was party to it, the House needs to know that is how he is attempting to operate in his department. If he didn't know about it, then the House needs to know that he has no grip on what his officials are up to. So his constant evasion of that question will not suffice. We need answers from the Secretary of State, and in time I'm sure we will get them. Now, particularly painful to my constituents will be the planned hike in national insurance contributions for the self-employed. Croydon North is one of the most ethnically diverse constituencies in the country, and unfortunately unemployment is particularly high amongst many minority communities. But their desire to work and their strong enterprising spirit means many people from these communities set up their own businesses. Self-employed people work as taxi drivers, van drivers, hairdressers, plumbers, decorators, childminders, all sorts of jobs. They work very long hours and often for very modest pay. In Croydon, well over 1 in 10 workers are self-employed, and it makes no sense whatsoever to clobber them with new tax rises. They need help and support, not further barriers to work. Absolutely.
What does he say then to the respected Institute for Fiscal Studies and the much respected Resolution Foundation, where they are today saying specifically on the measures identified by the honourable gentleman that they are progressive and that they are ameliorating inequality in the tax system as between people on PAYE and self-employed people?
Perhaps the honourable gentleman's party, including he himself, should have thought about that before they stood for election on a manifesto that said no increases in national insurance contributions. Absolutely categoric. Now, it does nothing for trust in politics when politicians say one thing to persuade people to vote for them, but once they're elected, do the polar opposite. You're helping to further break trust in this House and trust in politics. It's not down to the IFS, it's down to Tory Central Office, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And dare I say, he himself, if he's going to go forwards and vote for this. Now, with all of the uncertainty of Brexit And it's shocking that the Chancellor had so little to say about Brexit in his statement. But with all the uncertainty of Brexit, small businesses and the self-employed need reassurances, not broken promises. I'll turn to those in employment now as well, because this budget has very little on offer for them as well. Low pay and stagnant wages have become endemic. Most people have seen no growth in household incomes in the 10 years since the global financial crash. Indeed, many have seen a real terms cut in household incomes. The British economy may be getting richer, but British working people are getting poorer. Ours is the only advanced economy where wages fell while the economy grew between 2007 and 2015. In Croydon, average earnings have fallen by 7.6% in real terms, and today over one-third of my constituents earn less than a real living wage. So where's the money gone? Who's taken the proceeds of that growth? Because it's not the vast majority of people in Croydon or across Britain who work round the clock to pay the bills and put food on the table. It's the shrinkingly small number of the super-rich whose interests this government really represents. Wages are stuck, household debt is soaring, but the Chancellor had absolutely nothing to say about any of it.
Is my honourable friend aware of the Resolution Foundation's report out today, which says the UK is set for the worst decade for pay growth in 200 years?
Well, that's absolutely shocking, but it's what we're seeing in our constituencies, and it's what our constituents are telling us. And once upon a time in this country, there was a covenant between people and government. People gave their consent to the system in return for a fair reward for the work they put in. There was an understanding that if you worked hard, you would do well. You could expect a decent home, security for your family, health care when you fell ill or when you grew old, and if you couldn't work, you'd be looked after with dignity and respect. But today, that covenant is broken. The unfairness and the inequality this government stokes has bred resentment that has catapulted us out of the European Union over a cliff edge into uncertainty.
I can't allow the honourable gentleman for Croydon North to propagate this myth. The gap between the poorest and richest 10% of our population was the highest it's ever been under a Labour government. And it's this government who I'm proud to say has delivered something that was never delivered in 13 years of a Labour government, a national living wage to assist the poorest member of our community who are in work.
This government has absolutely divided the country, different parts of the country from each other, communities from each other. I'll give you a statistic that shows how they've done it. The 10 poorest councils in the country, since the government came in 2010, the 10 poorest councils in the country have experienced cuts 17 times bigger than the 10 richest. Now, if that isn't divisive, I do not know what is. And that is happening on top of the fact that jobs have been lost to automation, factories have moved abroad, British people have been denied the investment skills and training they need to compete in a global economy, and wages are stagnating. The Tories have made all of this worse by targeting the poorest communities for the biggest scale of the cuts. They've put the greatest burden on the weakest shoulders, and they've done it as a deliberate political tactic.